Hello, I'm Zoltán Lehowski from Lombik Technologies. Let me show you Orchard Core CMS. So, you are probably here because you have already heard about Orchard, and probably you have also checked out how Orchard looks like, how it works, which kind of features are included in here. Here I would like to give you a good general introduction and general overview of what's built into Orchard, what the community is, what features are in there, just a quick overview. For more information, do check out our Dojo Course, which is a complete tutorial series, and the corresponding training demo module, which is a complete annotated example module for Orchard. So if you're interested in the code, check out that. In more details, check out the Dojo Course. For a quick overview, please stay here. Well, you are probably already sold on the idea of a CMS, so not much to elaborate there, but just a bit of an overview of why we are using a CMS in the first place. So why we are using something like Orchard. Although Orchard is not just a CMS, Orchard is also an application framework. Well, why we use a CMS, a content management system, is because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. CMSs have a lot of features in them. There is obviously content management, then user management, media management. Everything is in there that you might need for a more or less general website. So it's most of the time a good foundation to build your own web applications on top of it. And CMSs commonly are also a framework, just as Orchard Core is. So you not only get a bunch of features built in, but you also get a nice framework for all the developer level stuff that you might need. You also get a foundation for the application development part. And the framework also provides you with a lot of guidelines on how to structure your application, how to develop your application, sometimes also how to deploy it, how to operate and host it. These are all useful stuff that you don't really have to think of yourself. Everything will be just given to you. And of course, a CMS is not just a piece of code in vacuum. There is always some kind of community where you can get support from, where you can meet other people, you get help from, you can hire people from this community. So that's also very useful, because at that point you are not alone, you are in a community. You can also get support from a community for an open source project there as well. For non-open source projects, of course, there is some kind of company that provides support specifically too. Now, talking about Orchard specifically, as I mentioned, Orchard is not just a CMS, but it's also a framework. And how it is described on the website, on orchardcore.net, is that Orchard is an open source, modular, multi-tenant application framework and CMS for ASP.NET Core. So let's take a bit of time and let's try to understand each of these phrases. So, yeah, what is Orchard actually? Well, open source. I hope you do know what open source means. The full source code of Orchard is available. You can inspect it. You can change it for your own purposes if you like. And it's also free. So there is no licensing fee you have to pay. There are no restrictions on how you can use Orchard. There is a license though. So there are some things you need to adhere to, but those are very basic, and pretty much the gist of it is that you have to include the license file when you are reusing Orchard, and then you mustn't use Orchard, the Orchard name in a way that it implies that the Orchard community endorses you in any way without written permission. So open source is good because it's a completely open system. You can learn a lot from it as a developer too. You can audit the whole thing, and if you found an issue, you can quickly find out the cause of it as well. Now, what does modular mean? Modularization, of course, is good. If you are writing an application which is not trivially small, then you have to divide it into smaller pieces, also called modules, or rather modules is one way to divide an application into, well, bigger functional pieces. That's usually what we call modules. But even within a plugin like an Orchard module, there is modularization. Logic is divided into a lot of classes. There is single responsibility principle. There is don't repeat yourself principle. So all in all, modularization is a good software development practice. And Orchard very much supports that. It provides you with a lot of infrastructure, a lot of APIs, a lot of features to easily modularize your application, to easily create smaller pieces that which then nicely play together. Now, what's multi-tenant? That's something probably less known. Multi-tenancy in this case means that a single Orchard application can run any number of Orchard websites. And those websites can have different configuration, they can have different content, they can be, as far as the users are concerned, they can be completely independent, running under different domains. They don't know anything about each other, but it's still the same application running beneath them. It's still the same code that drives all of these websites. And why is this good? This is very useful if you want to host applications for your clients. Like you host a lot of websites for your clients, but those websites are more or less technically the same, as you can run them from the same application. Similarly, if you have a software as a service product, multi-tenancy is commonly that can help there a lot. Because what you gain there is that it's much easier to deploy the application, since it's just one application, not one for each client, but for all clients or users or websites, it's just one application. It's easier to operate because of the same reason, and you can pack those websites or web apps very, very tightly. Having an application or running an application has its own overheads. There is the overhead of .NET, of course. There is the overhead of Orchard. So there's a baseline that you always need in terms of hardware resources, CPU, RAM, storage. Now, if you can run multiple web apps, websites from the same application, then that means that the baseline overhead is just counted once. You only pay it once, and then you can pack a lot more websites onto the same web server. So, for example, instead of having to pay 100 megabytes of RAM or so for each separate application, you are just paying something like 10 as the baseline for every tenant. As said, Orchard is also an application framework, so it's very developer friendly. I'm also a developer. I have been working with Orchard Core and its predecessor, Orchard 1, for about 9 years. It's very, very developer friendly, very flexible, very extensible. It has a lot of features for developers. And it's framework as well as a CMS. And of course, the underlying framework is ASP.NET Core. And let's see the details of Orchard Core then. What's in there? Well, as said, it's built on .NET Core, the latest version of it. It will also be updated to .NET 5 and later versions, of course. And it uses the MVC paradigm. That's kind of important. Since it's ASP.NET Core, you can also write your middlewares and everything. But by default, how you structure your code is in the MVC paradigm. You write your controllers, you write your views as Razor templates or as templates written in the Liquid templating language. And you have models and everything else that corresponds to this. As said, Orchard is open source, and it's actually under the umbrella of .NET Foundation. The .NET Foundation is a foundation that helps open source projects with a lot of nice services, intellectual property related legal services and everything. A lot of big .NET open source projects are under the .NET Foundation. Orchard One was also or is under .NET Foundation too. And Orchard Core is a pretty big project, pretty big app, and a very active community, a very actively developed project. Up until now, there are about 4,000 commits in the repository, which was provided by 170 contributors. Of course, a lot of these contributors just contribute 1-2 patches, but still you can get a bit of an understanding of how much work is going into Orchard and how many people are supplying that. And another metric that's interesting here is that on GitHub there are a lot of issues in the Orchard Core project page. There are actually 4,000, more than 4,000 ones currently. But the good news is that these are getting closed and fixed and implemented all the time. The overwhelming majority of them is already closed, so 3,200 ones. And I already mentioned that there is an Orchard One. Orchard One is still alive and kicking. It's a more or less actively developed project, although it mostly gets maintenance work nowadays because the community focuses on Orchard Core. And Orchard One is the .NET Framework version of Orchard Core. So it was, of course, the initial Orchard Core version. It started back in 2009, I think, and it's built on the MVC paradigm as well, so it uses ASP.NET MVC, the not core MVC. It's a huge project as well. The feature sets and the concepts of Orchard One and Orchard Core are largely overlapping. Orchard One has more than 10,000 commits there, similar number of contributors, and a lot of issues on GitHub too. And since we already started to talk about history, let me give you a bit of an overview of where we are coming from with Orchard. As mentioned, Orchard started around 2009, at least that's when it became more or less public. And first, it was developed by a team at Microsoft. Still, Orchard's core is supported by Microsoft in various ways, also with a almost full-time developer, Sebastian. But initially, it was fully developed by a team at Microsoft, by a team that also developed ASP.NET. And this connection between the ASP.NET, or nowadays ASP.NET Core, and ASP.NET Core MVC teams and Orchard is also living. There are people from the ASP.NET Core team working on Orchard, either a lot of times or occasionally, and a lot of concepts for Orchard One actually were brought into ASP.NET Core. Orchard first was hosted the source code on Codeplex, because Codeplex was Microsoft's GitHub before Microsoft actually acquired GitHub. Then it was moved over to GitHub, of course. The first version was released in 2011. And in 2013 was when our company, Lombic Technologies, was founded. I said that I actually work with Orchard, have been working with Orchard since 2011 or so. So my business partner, Benedek, and I, we have been working with Orchard for a bit before founding our company, specifically to work with Orchard. So we are a very Orchard-focused company. And then with the advent of .NET Core, Orchard Core was started by several community contributors as well in 2014. That's a long time until version 1.0, which we anticipate to come out in 2012. But you see there were a lot of changes to .NET Core. So initially, it was a very unstable platform. Still a lot of changes between 1.0 and 2.0, and then up until 3.0 too. The Orchard needed to continuously follow that. But still, Orchard is production ready. It is used in a lot of production applications. We at Lombic have been working with Orchard on production applications for years. So even though technically it's not a 1.0, I would say it is actually a 1.0 quality. And I've already said that we with Lombic have been working with Orchard since 2013. We have been building up a nice, pretty big team of Orchard developers in the last years, and we are doing a lot of things with Orchard. We provide development services, but we also do training. As we already mentioned, Dojo Course. We have a lot of open source projects related to Orchard, both Orchard Core and Orchard One on GitHub. More than 120 open source projects there. We also do hosting, all kinds of consulting, so pretty much everything. So if you want to do something with Orchard and you need any kind of help, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Now, so far so good, but why would you choose Orchard and not something else? Not some kind of other .NET or .NET Core CMS or any other CMS? Well, first of all, Orchard, of course, since it's built on .NET or .NET Core specifically, of course, if you want to do something with .NET Core or even ASP.NET Core MVC, well, that's already a filtered list that you can work with, and Orchard there is a really good choice. Orchard is pretty much ASP.NET Core MVC, but greatly supercharged. Orchard doesn't invalidate anything that you know about ASP.NET Core. It builds on top of ASP.NET Core and extends it and adds a lot of nice features to it. So, for example, if you see a NuGet package or some kind of extension that works with ASP.NET Core, usually it will work in an Orchard-based application as well. Because how you create an Orchard application is that you create an ASP.NET Core web application and then you add Orchard to it in form of NuGet packages, of course. You can also select what you use from Orchard. You can just use the framework. You can use parts of the CMS. You can make Orchard just run the back end of your application, so only the admin area, but not the front end. You can let Orchard run both the back end, both the front end. You can let Orchard run the back end with no front end, with just APIs exposing the functionality and the content from an Orchard application. So it's very flexible. It builds on top of everything that you know already of .NET Core, ASP.NET Core, and the ASP.NET Core MVC. It builds on top of that. And as I said, because it follows a lot of good software development practices, and it's a very nicely well-designed system, it is immensely flexible. You can swap out everything. You can change everything. You can mix and match all the things there. The content model is very flexible too. And it has all the features of a CMS in there. So you get, of course, content management. You can get user management, which ties into the ASP.NET Core authentication pipeline. You get the mentioned multi-tenancy. You get workflows, audit trail. You get a lot of features that are very useful in pretty much any web application or any website. And not to mention, if you are a professional software developer, you can learn a lot from Orchard. since Orchard is open source, you can look through the whole code base. You can dig into it. You can understand everything, how it works with the debugger. It's very useful, especially if you are a more beginner developer, but even if you are a seasoned professional, you can learn a lot simply by browsing the Orchard source code, and also by extending it, so writing your own Orchard-based code, your own Orchard plugins. And of course, there is also a community. It's not just a software project. This is just a very small part of the community from one of the conferences that we have. This was, I think, in New York. And the Orchard community is, well, of course I'm biased, but I think it's very good. People are helpful. Well, it's already a pretty extensive community. It's not huge. The Orchard is not a very huge CMS project out there, but it's big enough that there is always something going on. You can always ask for help. You can always hire people if you need help with a project of yours. There are a lot of resources, a lot of tutorials. Of course, documentation can always be better. Everything can be always improved, but the current state is pretty good. And where the project and the community is headed is, I'm very optimistic about as well. And there are a lot of people who have already chosen Orchard, of course. So let me show you a couple of Orchard-based websites. These websites are both Orchard Core and Orchard One, as I'm mixing them, but it's the same community. Same concepts, partially also the same code. So let's see a few examples. For example, Starbucks Singapore uses Orchard. And this is, I think, an Orchard Core website. Yeah, pretty nice. And a pretty big brand, of course, with a lot of features. Another very nice brand, Royal Veterinary College from the University of London, has a very nice website on Orchard. So you can see the universities also use Orchard. And while we are at doctors, Patient Access, also from the UK, uses Orchard as well. This is an example of less of a website, but more like an interactive web application. Here you can get services from your general practitioner, make appointments, whatever is necessary for your healthcare online. So this is a part of a public service. And huge companies, apart from Starbucks, also use Orchards like Live Nation. House of Booze is a subsidiary of Live Nation clubs and theaters. You can see a pretty nice, pretty big website, also built on Orchard, with a lot of custom features like this event calendar here. And while we are at talking about big companies, you can see that Lexus, specifically Lexus from South Africa, is also using Orchard. But Orchard is also for smaller institutes, entities, civil associations like Bethany. I think it's a very nicely looking website, very modern, and utilizes Orchard under the hood. And while we are at entities that are not companies, you surely know the Smithsonian, which is the biggest museum institute in the world. And now the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage also uses Orchard. And actually they use it for 3 of their websites. They have 3 websites. Folklife is the main website, and then there is one for the Folkways record label and the Folklife Festival. Also quite a nice website, a lot of custom features, and it's a a big, very famous institute. And while we are at government institutions, the Employment Security Department of Washington State uses Orchard too. So also governments vote on Orchard. But this was just a small glimpse to it. Check out showOrchard.com. This is an Orchard showcase, a gallery of exemplary Orchard websites that is managed by us. So here you can take a look at all the websites, well, that we know about. If you know about one of them out there that we don't have listed here, do get in touch, please. And otherwise, these are the ones that we find really, really good. So these are not all the Orchard websites by far. Here, under categories, you can also check out websites under each of these. There is a separate one for just Orchard Core-based websites. And while we are at demos, let's also see Orchard in action. Let's try Orchard out. And for that, I will create a web application here locally and run it. Specifically, what I will do is that I will use a script to create a full Orchard solution here. So this will be a .NET Core application, ASP.NET Core web application with Orchard added to it and with a so-called module and theme. So let me open a partial window here. And in this partial window, I will run this init Orchard Core solution script. This is a script from one of our open source projects, utility scripts, but under the hood it uses the Orchard.NET, .NET.exe templates, and also the built-in .NET.exe templates for the solution, for example. It now creates a solution. It creates a web application in it, and it will also create two other projects, a module and a theme. Modules and themes are kinds of Orchard Core extensions, or plugins, rather, you could say that. Modules are more about functionality, and themes are more about look and feel and styling. Technically, they are very similar, but usually we put functionality into modules and look and feel into themes. And now that it is done, let me also open it. Here you can see that we get the solution, well, also a git ignore file, because most possibly this will go into a Git repo. And in the resource folder, we have the web project. I just named it Orchard Core Demo. And we have a folder for our modules, where there is only a single module yet, which is just a C# class library. And we also have a themes folder here with our single theme, which is also a class library. So let's also take a look at the solution from Visual Studio. Here we can see the same thing. And in the web app, you will see that it's pretty much just an ASP.NET Core web app as usual. There is one difference that, well, two differences, that in the startup class, we add Orchard CMS and use Orchard Core here. But otherwise, it's very similar to what you already know about ASP.NET Core. And it's also very similar to what you already know about ASP.NET Core MVC, because in our module, you see that we already have a controller and a corresponding view. Well, it's just a skeleton, of course, but it works exactly the same way as anywhere else using ASP.NET Core MVC. What makes such a class library a module is actually reference to this orchardcore.modules.targets package. And if you want to play very nicely, you also add a manifest file. A manifest file is mostly a bunch of human-readable text that users from the Orchard admin screen will be able to see. Themes are similar. They need just standard class libraries. They just need a reference to this orchardcore.theme.targets package and also a manifest file. We have references to several other Orchard Core packages here. These are not mandatory, but these are added by the templates because most of the time you will need them. All right, now let's also start this application and let's see our first steps with Orchard. So you can start it simply with Ctrl F5, so just as you would with any ASP.NET Core application. And while this will start it from within Visual Studio with IIS Express, of course, simply .NET Run works as well. So everywhere where you can host and run an ASP.NET Core application, Orchard will work the same. There's nothing special. When you first start up a newly created Orchard application, what you will greet it by will be the setup screen. As we'll see, it's fairly simple. Everything is fairly self-explanatory, but we will take a look at it nevertheless. And now that it's loaded, let's check it out. It was localized, just as Orchard is localized as well. Not every language has full support for every string in Orchard, but there are a couple of languages that are pretty much 100% ready. For the other ones, we would be very happy to take your contribution. Now, the setup screen, let's give it a name. Let's call it demo. And then there is something called a recipe here. And this is a very useful concept in Orchard. Recipes are basically JSON files that you can use to export the content and configuration of an Orchard site into. And then you can also import those recipes on other websites. Furthermore, you can also use recipes as kind of websites templates on the setup screen. So if you have kinds of clients, like you always have a car dealership as a client, and then a creative agency as the client, and you already know that these kind of clients, these kind of companies need more or less the same, then you can create website templates like this with recipes. And of course, once you have set up the website, you can customize everything for the specific client, but you will get a baseline with it. So recipes like this are very powerful. And furthermore, you can also deploy such recipes remotely. So you can move content and configuration between Orchard websites, not just by exporting to a file and then importing it somewhere else, but directly over the internet. There are a couple of basic built-in recipes here. I will just use the blog one, which will configure as a nice blog. Orchard can use multiple database engines out of the box. SQL Server or SQLite is something that we use mostly. SQLite is super simple. It's just a flat file, of course. So I will use that one. But if you set up a proper database server, you can also use SQL Server, MySQL, or Postgre. Orchard by default stores almost all the data and all of the content in the SQL database. But just as everything in Orchard, that is also very extensible and very flexible, so you can mix and match there too. It's mind-blowing. And then we also need to create the default admin user here. I will just use an example user, and the password, usually we use password1 exclamation mark as a demo or development password, because that's the minimum that satisfies the password criteria. And then I hit enter, and now the setup is running. Now Orchard creates the database, the SQLite database behind the scenes, creates all the tables in there, and imports the recipe to create us this nice blog. Yeah, you can see that we have a bit of a nice look and feel, some basic example content. Here we have a single blog post. This blog post has title, subtitle, some metadata here, and of course a text or a body. And furthermore, some categorization with taxonomies, this module is called, and with tags. And the menu here as well. So that's pretty nice, pretty basic. Of course, this is just to get you started or to build a very simple blog. But now let's also take a look at the admin area. So I will log in. Orchard's admin area is accessible from under /admin. So here we can log in with our admin user, of course. And you may notice that this doesn't really have the same look and feel as the front end there. That's because this can also be independent of the front end, but you can also configure it to be in the context of the front end theme. As here we have the admin. It's you see pretty easy to understand. I hope so. You can have the menu here if you are on a smaller screen. Otherwise, you have everything here. So we are in a blog. Let's check out how we can manage that blog. So let's open this blog menu here, and now we are at the blog list. And here is our blog post as well. If you open it, we will check out. We will be able to see a content item editor. Here it is, and you see that we have the title of a blog post here. The static resources are still loading. We have a title of a blog post here. The permalink, the human readable URL is generated here, and of course the blog text, which is by the way written in Markdown. So there is built-in support for Markdown like this too. And there's a subtitle and the mentioned categorization. So let's play around this with this a bit. There is actually a live preview feature, so I will use that. So let me put that to the right and the editor on the left, and we'll see that whatever I change on the left-hand side will immediately change on the right-hand side. Yep. For example, I can start typing here, or let's write something better here in the Markdown body. We can, of course, write some obligatory hello world, and you can see you can edit it in a way that everything is visible in the context of the actual front end of the website, so everything looks and feels like it will do when you publish this content item. So let me actually do exactly that, and I will publish it. Yeah, and since now we are out of the editor, the preview was disconnected, but we can still open up this content item here, and now we see that under the mentioned permalink we have the changes here. But you don't need to publish it right away, as you can also change something here that might be a mistake, or that you want people to review or something, and then you don't need to publish. You can also save it as a draft. And once we have this as a draft, the published version is still the same. You see it didn't change, because now this current version here, this latest version, is a draft. The Orchard also has such drafting capabilities built in, and what's more, it also has versioning built in. So if I go here and hit publish drafts here, because we have this quick menu here too, then the draft will be published. On the front end, we can also see our mistake, well, regretfully, but the previous version is not actually overwritten. It didn't vanish. It's in the database. You can also access it with the audit trail module, but the latest published version is this one. All of these versions are kept in the database. You can move between them. You can restore previous versions. And when you delete a content item, that deletion will be a soft delete as well. A hard delete, so a complete destroy is also possible, but by default, a delete like this one here will be a soft delete. So all the content, all the versions will remain in the database. It will be just hidden from view. Of course, this is very useful for compliance reasons if you need that. But even if you just want to go back because you made a mistake, that's quite useful. And I said that Orchard is very extensible, very flexible. The content model is like that too. And one example of that is how the building blocks of content items are. Because here we have a blog post, and that blog post, for example, has a title and a permalink. But we can't just create blog posts. This is a CMS. We should be able to create other kinds of content as well. And we can, if we check out the new menu here, we can also create articles. So you can think of them as kind of like pages, simple pages. And in this article, you see that we also have a very similar title field here, and a very similar permalink field here, and a different body field, because here we are using HTML body instead of Markdown body that we do here, although the VCVig editor is kind of similar. So why do we have the same title and same permalink? This is because both of these content items are built from the same building block. Specifically, what we see here is that the title is provided by something called a title part. So let me give you a bit of an overview of terminology. If we open content definition here, we will be able to see the blueprint of the contents in Orchard. So it's kind of like looking at the classes, where this blog post that we have here is pretty much like an object. Here, under content definition, we can take a look at the blog post class. And if we take a look at the blog post class, you see that, well, it has some metadata, blah, 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 and other parts, it has title. So this blog post content type is composed of multiple content parts, like title, which provides the title functionality, or author out, which provides that permalink field and the permalink functionality. And there are a lot of such parts. Furthermore, there is also something else called content fields, which are even smaller building blocks. But the main point is that you build your content types out of smaller building blocks called content parts. And then you create specific items of those content types. So that means that you can mix and match these building blocks, the content parts. You can add your own content parts. You can get third-party modules that contain content parts. And you can build your own content types. You can change existing content types, even if they come from a built-in recipe like this. This is very, very flexible. And there's a lot of reusability, since there is one title part. If you need title functionality anywhere, you just use that title part. Nothing else to develop, nothing else to add, nothing to hack around if you want to change those. You just add the content parts, and pretty much that's it. Quite nice. There are other content types built in that you can create right away, and this is just the configuration of the blog recipe. This is not full Orchard here. The blog recipe configured this site in a way that it's suitable for a blog. Not everything is turned on, not everything is added here, just what you need for a blog. But, for example, we also have something called a page, which is also something a bit similar like article, but here you can build more complex structures. Because, well, let me call it demo. Because here we have a kind of a canvas where you can put widgets. Widgets like you can put a paragraph of text here. So think of this page as really building a static page on a website, not a blog post, but a permanently visible page. Here you can write a paragraph of text. All right, we can also close this. But then you can add new widgets here. You can also add a container, and that container can contain multiple such paragraphs. So I can also add something inside this container. You can also add HTML in its raw form, so something here, or it can be strong, so we can see that it actually works. And again, hello here. And yeah, I put it into the top here, but you can move it around. You can put it into this container. You can put it above the paragraph and below the paragraph. And furthermore, you see that you can align these widgets, and the widgets can have a basic width as well. What we are looking at here is called flow part. Flow part is called flow part because all of these widgets kind of flow together. This is a responsive layout. So if you have enough space, then the widgets that are aligned to be adjacent to another, they will be beside each other. But if there is not enough space, they will be flown below each other. Yeah, we have the same preview functionality in here. And these widgets, by the way, are also just content items. You can also create your own widgets. But for now, we have used the built-in ones. And if you open a preview, we see that, well, those widgets actually worked. Well, that was something that we awaited, I think, though. And of course, Orchard has a lot more content management and everything else built in. For example, you can use a media library. If you want to add images, documents, or something, you can use the media library. For example, I can create a folder for kittens here, and then I can just upload kittens from my computer here. And then we get some nice media library, media management features. Pretty standard stuff here. You can edit, remove, do whatever you want with these images, and not just images, because you can put any kind of files here, but with restrictions, with security restrictions. And once you have these here, you can also, for example, go back to the page that we have created, the demo page, here, and in the container, or even outside the container, let's put it outside, we can add an image widget now. And this image widget will now let us access these kitten pictures. So I'll select this one. I like this one. And now in the preview, you can see that the kitten is here. And not just here, but if you open up our blog post, you also get a media library integration here. So if I want to put a kitten image here, somewhere within 2 paragraphs, I can just open this in the media library, open kittens, select another image this time, and edit here. And you see that Orchard operates with such shortcodes. So the reference to a media file is dynamic. If you move your website within environments, if you change the storage implementation, you go from local storage to Azure Blob Storage or something like that, this will still work. You don't need to change the content because the URLs to the files are automatically generated. And of course, it's not just about content. It's also about user management. User management, of course, is built in. You can add users here, remove users, disable, enable users, edit their passwords if you want to do that, although that's not something really recommended. And of course, Orchard has access control to authorization. That's with role-based access control. So if I open this admin user, which is the user that we have created during setup, you see that it has the administrator role. It can have multiple roles as well, but what these roles correspond to are a bunch of permissions. So once I open roles here and open the administrator role, you see that we have a long list of permissions in the system. You can turn these permissions on or off. Well, the administrator role has all the permissions, but you can turn these permissions on or off independently. There are a lot of built-in permissions for the various features. There are a lot of built-in permissions for content management. You can specify that, okay, users in this role can edit blog posts, or they can create and edit blog posts, but they can't publish them, or they can do everything, but they can't delete them, because that's kind of risky. But you can also restrict that they can't edit pages at all, just blog posts. So all of these options are available here. Very flexible, very useful, and of course you can also add your own permissions. As a developer, you can extend everything that you see here. So whatever you see here is just the out-of-the-box experience, but you can change everything, including rolling out your own permissions. And since I already mentioned it, your own modules and themes. Here under configuration and features, you can see all the built-in features of Orchard. And as you can see, some of them are enabled that you can disable, like the content preview. But some of these features are not enabled, that those you can enable. This is again the modularization of Orchard. There's a lot of stuff built in, but not everything needs to be available at all times, for security reasons, for performance reasons, and simply because you don't need them, so you don't want to see them in the menus here. So all of these modules can be separately turned on or off. Let's also turn on actually one module here called workflows. Workflows is a very useful module. We can also turn on multiple such features at once, because again we have modularization. There is a basic workflows feature, but then there are other features that depend on this basic feature. But let me enable it. Workflows is pretty much visual programming. You get a canvas and you can create really kind of a visual program there that you can use to automate a lot of things in Orchard, or to hook into the system in various ways. So for example, if you want to thank a blog post author for their contribution, you can create a workflow here. Let's call it thank you. Yeah, well, the configuration is not important right now. And once the workflow is created, we can get going and we can get creative here. The workflows can be used to extend Orchard, but they are not the only way to extend Orchard, of course, because from code, from your own modules, you can do the same thing. This is just more convenient and already integrated into a lot of parts of Orchard. How workflow works, here we have this canvas, and we can put various tasks and events onto this canvas. A workflow always needs to start somehow, and that's with an event. So, for example, we can use the content created event or the content published event to start this workflow. Let's use the content published one. This will be a bit easier, but you see that there are a lot of options to start a workflow. You can start a workflow on all kinds of content or user events. You can start a workflow with a webhook by calling into a URL. And you can, for example, also start a workflow with a timer. So you can say that I want this workflow to run every 5 minutes or every 5 days. For now, let's select content published, and that will be our starting event. And content published if a blog post is published, or we could select the other content types here. We have our familiar page and article here too. And now that the event is here, let's make it the start event, and let's also add the task. Let's add the task to thank the user, to display a thank you message. And again, we have a lot of tasks here. And just as everything else in Orchard, this is also extensible. From your own module, you can put your own tasks here. And, well, there are a lot of very useful tasks here already. Again, a lot of them are related to content management, user management. You can also call webhooks from here. You can run scripts, JavaScript scripts. And since I mentioned workflows are kind of visual programming, you can also add programming constructs. You can add if and if else conditional block. You can also add a loop. Now, workflows is not something that you'd use to develop very, very complex pieces of logic, but it's a very useful feature to extend Orchard right away from the admin. For now, what we'll do is that we'll use this notify task to display a notification to the user. Yeah, we have various notification types. The green one is success. Let's do that because, well, a thank you message is a success, right? And here we can specify the message, which can be a string, but it actually has Liquid support. You probably know Liquid. Liquid is a markup language, it's a templating language, originally started by Shopify. And Orchard has full support for Liquid. Liquid here is a first-class citizen. What I recommend writing your templates in is still Razor. You know, the Razor is basically C# with HTML. But you can also write your templates in Liquid. And what's more important right now is that when you need to specify some kind of dynamic string, where pieces will be substituted from some contextual data, from variables, then there is also Liquid support. As if we want to display a thank you message to the user, and we want to use their name, like thank you, John Doe, then we somehow need to access that name. That's a dynamic parameter. We can't write it in here. And Liquid helps us with that. And, well, Liquid is just Liquid as usual with some Orchard-specific stuff. And this string what we have here is, well, not even really Orchard-specific, it's ASP.NET Core specific. We can access the current user with user.identity.name, which is, of course, the ASP.NET Core identity model. This is that user object. Now that we have that, we can move these boxes around here, and we can connect them. The workflow is always that something happens, and then we connect it with the next thing, and then the next thing. So we could also do something after the notification here. And of course, this is a very simple workflow. As mentioned, you can have all kinds of complex structures here, but for now, this will be enough. And now if we go back to our blog post and save it, or rather publish it, because that's the event we used, we can see this nice thank you message. And you may notice that the admin is now very snappy, very fast. The first time, since we are talking about a .NET application, there is some just-in-time compilation. The first request will be a bit slower while everything is initialized. But after that, it's super fast. Now, we have already talked about modules a bit, but there are also themes, which I mentioned is another kind of extension, another kind of Orchard plugins. And you can manage these from under design and themes here. Usually the first plugin that you write for an Orchard application would be a theme, because you know the look and feel should be unique for every website, so that's quite common. You don't necessarily need a module every time, because you don't necessarily need to write a lot of C# code to do something. But themes, that's usually that you need all the time. There are a couple of themes built into Orchard. You see we are using the block theme currently, but there are a couple of other themes too, including our sample theme that was generated automatically by the templates, the code generation templates. So let's actually enable that. Let's make this the current theme. And now if we go back to the front end of the site, we will see how our theme looks like. And it's beautiful. It's very minimalistic. It's completely responsive, very accessible, right? Well, of course, there is no styling at all because that's just a skeleton. But still, we can go into the code and play around a tiny bit. Maybe something happens here. Because if we open the theme, we'll see that there is already a view here. And it's actually a liquid template. So the code generation template created a liquid template for us here. And you see here is now a bit more complex liquid code, but it's more or less liquid as usual. You can see the liquid tags and variable references here. And if we change something here, again, we can do a hello world, of course, because everything is about hello world. Now, we should see our message here on the front end too. So we are already Orchard developers. We didn't just create a workflow and have written some liquid, but we also created a theme and we have written some liquid there too. So awesome. We are ready to get a job at Lombik. And of course, there is a lot more in Orchard. We have put widgets on a page, but you can also put widgets onto layers here under widgets. That's reusing the same concepts, but instead of putting widgets, so these little big boxes of content onto just one page, here with layers, you can put them on multiple pages. Like you can put an info box or a contact form on the right-hand side on every page. Quite useful. There is search and indexing built into Orchard. This was already configured by the blog recipe, but what happens here behind the scenes is that there's a Lucene index called search. So Lucene, the search and indexing library, is used behind the scenes here. This was already pre-configured. So if we open the search form on the front end, we will see how it actually works. I happen to know that this is under search. And if you can search for hello, and there is a single index content item that contains hello here, our hello world message, which is the blog post, as you can see, that also works. You can also write SQL queries from here, by the way, and Lucene queries from the query admin here. And this is very powerful. So Orchard provides you a lot of flexible, extensible ways to list content items. But there are some simple ways built in, but you can also go hardcore and you can write your own Lucene queries, because you know Lucene is kind of a NoSQL database as well. So you can write a Lucene query like this to list content items which are indexed in a Lucene index. Similarly, you can write SQL queries here. Now, I already hear what you are saying, that, wow, I'm writing SQL from the admin. Well, yeah, that might sound bad at the first glimpse, but it's actually very safe because there is an SQL interpreter that doesn't know about any data manipulation commands, so you can't write an update or drop query here. And secondly, well, it is flexible. So either we would build some very intricate UI for building lists here, for building pretty much queries, or you can just use the language of queries, which is SQL if we are talking about tabular data. There are also templates built in. I said Liquid is a first-class citizen. You can use Liquid everywhere, even in certain places in queries, but you can also create specific templates here. You can override whole pieces of the Orchard markup just by writing Liquid code here. Because, by the way, the front end of Orchard is built up of little pieces. Every little piece that's displayed there is its own template. And that's also very flexible because, for example, the title is its own template. The markdown body of the blog post is its own template as well. So if you want to change how one of these work or one of these look like, you can just override that. And you can also override it using Liquid and using Razor. And Liquid you can also do from the admin area. So lot of features. Of course, this was just the very tip of the iceberg. I encourage you to check it out. You can just download the full source code and run it right away. You can also generate a NuGet-based application like this right away. Or on the Orchard website, you can also try Orchard from the user-facing front end right away too. Here, if you click on the orchardcore.net website, if you click Try Orchard, you will be able to use kind of a software as a service. This software as a service is just for test driving Orchard. So here you can quickly set up an Orchard site. You see that this is a similar experience than the setup screen we had. It's not a setup screen, but a similar experience. You can quickly create a site here and then play around with it. Do note that these are reset every week, so whatever you do will vanish. This is just for test driving Orchard. And if you need more samples, more documentation, do check out the docs. It's under docs.orchardcore.net. We have a lot of documentation there. And while you're a newcomer, you are also very much welcome to contribute to the documentation because your newcomer experiences are very, very valuable. So that's great. I want to create an Orchard application. I already created an Orchard application. Where can I put it? Well, apart from my own computer. And you can host it anywhere where you can host ASP.NET Core. Of course, you can run it without a web server, without an external web server with Kestrel. You can also run it with an external web server like IIS. So it's also possible to put it into an Azure App Service or something like that and host it there. There are also official Docker images available, or you can package up your application too. And while there is no public software as a service offering where you could ramp up simpler Orchard Core websites quickly, we are actually working on that. We have a service called .nest. Currently, it's only available for Orchard 1, where you can go there, click, and now you have an Orchard website that actually sticks. So it's not wiped out every week. So if you like this, and I really hope you did, here are some tips on where to start. Of course, the official website and the official documentation should be your go-to first step. Secondly, I also recommend you to check out orcharddojo.net. Orchard Dojo is our website. It's our Orchard learning and training website, and there are a lot of very useful resources in there. We have, for example, a weekly blog post about the news of Orchard and the community, where we write about what happened, new features, demos, new websites, so you can get inspired, that kind of stuff. That also goes out as a newsletter. We also have the Dojo Course tutorial series there. There are actually 3 Dojo courses currently. Dojo Course 3, the latest one, is about Orchard Core. It's a complete video tutorial series starting with the very basics and arriving at you becoming a new Orchard developer. And then Dojo Course 2 is for Orchard 1. If you want to understand and learn more about the developer side of Orchard, I also encourage you to check out the training demo module. Our training demo module is a thoroughly documented Orchard Core module that guides through on becoming an Orchard developer. If you like to learn from code, then that is for you, because there you can start, and step by step you will you will get familiar with Orchard's practices, all the conventions and all the pieces of the Orchard API. By the end of it, you will know pretty much everything that you need to know in everyday Orchard development. It's very complete, and people are saying that it's very useful too. So that was it. Thank you for your attention. If you would like to get in touch with me or with my team members at Lombic, please write to us at crew@lombic.com. Otherwise, check out what we have done with Orchard, what we can offer you and your team in Orchard under lombic.com. So, thank you.